The house was quiet. Too quiet some nights felt heavier than others, and tonight was one of those nights. Emma sat curled up on her favorite armchair, a soft blanket draped around her shoulders, staring at the muted glow of the living room lamp. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, brushing against the windows in a rhythm that was almost musical but tinged with loneliness. The occasional hum of a passing car reminded her that the world beyond her home was still moving, still full of life, but somehow she felt disconnected from it. Emma had always been a hopeful soul, someone who believed in the beauty of small moments, the warmth of genuine connections, and the magic of chance encounters. But lately, life had felt like a slow march of missed opportunities, quiet disappointments, and evenings spent waiting for someone to appear at her door who never would. Tonight, like many nights before, she was alone, and it was in that solitude that the ache in her chest felt most pronounced. She reached for her cup of tea, her fingers brushing the smooth ceramic with a sense of ritual. The warmth of the tea was comforting, but it couldn't chase away the gnawing feeling of emptiness that seemed to settle in her stomach. Sometimes, she thought, it wasn't just about being alone, it was about longing for something she couldn't quite name. A hand to hold, a voice to hear, a connection that felt like it had been missing all her life. Emma's life was quiet, predictable, and safe. She had a steady job at a small design studio in the city, a few close friends who called regularly, and weekends filled with errands and occasional movie nights. But in the quiet moments, the ones that stretched on after the world had gone to sleep, she often felt as though she were standing on the edge of something just beyond her reach. She didn't know what it was, exactly. Love, friendship, a spark of inspiration, perhaps all of it, or perhaps none. Tonight, she tried to push her thoughts away by focusing on the little things, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the flicker of the lamp, the faint smell of vanilla from the candle she'd lit earlier. But her mind kept wandering, drifting to memories she hadn't thought about in years. Memories of laughter shared under the warm glow of streetlights, the comfort of conversations that lasted late into the night, and moments when she had felt truly seen. Those memories were bittersweet, sweet because they had existed at all, and bitter because they had slipped through her fingers. Before she could hold on to them, just as she was beginning to settle into the rhythm of quiet reflection, a sound broke through the stillness, a soft, deliberate knock at the front door. Emma's heart jumped, and she paused mid-sip, the warmth of the tea suddenly forgotten. Visitors were rare, especially at this hour. The knock came again, slightly louder this time, yet there was something gentle about it, something that didn't feel threatening. Emma hesitated. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to convince herself it was just the wind or a neighbor returning a misplaced package. But another part of Hertha, part that had spent too many nights alone, felt an inexplicable tug of curiosity, a flutter of hope that maybe, just maybe, this visitor could bring a spark of change. She rose slowly, her bare feet pressing against the cool wooden floor as she approached the door. Her fingers trembled slightly as they reached for the handle. And for a brief moment she hesitated, wondering if she was ready for whatever or whoever was on the other side. Her reflection in the glass panel of the door caught her by surprise. She looked tired, yes, but also alive, full of quiet resilience and unspoken longing. Taking a deep breath, she turned the handle and pulled the door open. And there, standing on her doorstep, was someone she had never expected to see. The sight of him made her heart catch in a way that was both familiar and startling. It wasn't just a face, it was a story, a memory. A wave of emotions that rushed over her with overwhelming force. "Emma," he said softly, his voice carrying a gentle hesitation. I hope I'm not intruding." She blinked, caught between shock and curiosity. Her mind raced with questions, but before she could speak, she felt the undeniable stirrings of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope that maybe this unexpected visitor wasn't just a coincidence. Hope that tonight her quiet, lonely house might witness a story that had been waiting to unfold. And hope that perhaps the emptiness she had carried for so long could finally be touched by something new. Something real, something profoundly human. Emma stepped aside, silently inviting him in, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to wonder what the night might bring. Part 2. The past and connection. The door closed softly behind Michael, and for a moment, the house felt smaller, warmer, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Emma led him into the living room, the familiar scent of vanilla and warm tea mixing with the faint trace of his cologne. She noticed how natural it felt. Despite the years that had passed like stepping into a story she had once read and suddenly found herself inside again. They sat across from each other, a cautious distance between them, each unsure of how to begin after so many years. The silence was not awkward. It was expectant, like the pause before a favorite song starts. It's the kind that holds both tension and anticipation. "Michael," Emma finally said, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't think. I never expected to see you again." He smiled, a small, almost shy smile that carried years of memories. "I never expected it either," he replied. "But life, well, it has a way of surprising us, doesn't it?" And in that simple exchange, the walls of time seemed to bend. Memories began to surface, delicate and vivid, like snapshots of moments that had been tucked away in a dusty corner of their hearts. Emma remembered the long walks they had taken along the tree-lined streets of their old neighborhood, the way Michael had laughed when she told stories she thought were silly, and the quiet afternoons spent sharing books and coffee, simply enjoying each other's presence. She remembered how easy it had felt to talk to him, how he had a way of listening that made her feel seen and understood in ways no one else could. Michael's eyes softened as he looked at her, and Emma realized he was lost in his own recollections. She saw the gentle tilt of his head as he remembered late-night conversations about dreams, fears, and the kind of plans that never quite came to fruition. They had once shared everything with each other, and it was impossible not to feel the weight of those moments now. Sitting across from him after so long, there were times, Michael said quietly, when I wished I could have told you everything I was feeling. But I was scared. I thought maybe I'd ruin what we already had. Emma felt a pang of recognition. She had been scared too, scared of admitting how much he mattered to her, scared of being vulnerable, scared of the unknown. "I think I felt the same," she admitted. "We were. Young, maybe too cautious, too careful to take a chance on what we had." They laughed softly together, a sound that was part joy, part nostalgia, and part bittersweet longing. In that laughter, the years seemed to collapse. And for a moment, they were simply Emma and Michael, again two people who had shared something rare and beautiful. Now reunited, fragile yet undeniable. Michael reached for his cup of tea, but didn't drink immediately. "Do you ever think about those days?" he asked, his tone almost hesitant. "All the time," Emma confessed. "I think about what could have been, and sometimes I wonder if it's too late to find out." Her words hung in the air, not heavy, but filled with an unspoken yearning. Michael's eyes met hers, and in them she saw the same mixture of hope and fear she felt. The years apart had not erased the bond they had built. If anything, it had grown stronger in the quiet spaces where neither had spoken but both had remembered. They spoke then of small things, jobs, neighborhoods, friends they still kept in touch with. But beneath the surface, the conversation was layered with the weight of unspoken emotions. Every pause, every glance, every hesitant smile carried the memory of closeness that had once defined their connection. Emma thought of the moment when Michael had left all those years ago. It hadn't been dramatic or angry, just a quiet drift apart, circumstances pulling them in opposite directions. And yet that gentle separation had never dimmed the warmth she felt whenever she thought of him. "I missed this," Michael said suddenly, breaking a moment of silence. "Not just you, but this. The way it felt to talk, to connect without pretending, to feel like there was someone who truly understood me." Emma's chest tightened. She knew exactly what he meant. "I missed it too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even when I tried to move on, it always came back to you. I think part of me was waiting for this, waiting for you." A quiet stillness settled between them, comfortable and warm. filled with the weight of memories and the fragile promise of what could come. They didn't need to rush, didn't need to explain everything in words. The room itself seemed to hold their shared history, a silent witness to the bond that neither time nor distance had broken, for the first time in years. Emma felt her heart open just a little. Not with expectation, not with pressure, but with the gentle acknowledgement that some connections, no matter how long they're apart, remain. And in that quiet evening, as the wind whispered outside and the lamp cast a soft glow across the room, Emma realized that perhaps the story between her and Michael wasn't finished yet. It was only beginning a new chapter. The clock on the wall ticked softly, each second marking the quiet rhythm of the night. Emma and Michael had talked for hours, recalling memories, laughing over old jokes, and occasionally pausing in silence as if letting the weight of the past sink in. Yet even as they reminisced, something unspoken lingered between them, an electric awareness that the present was quietly nudging them toward something neither had expected. It was a small thing at first. A forgotten photograph on the mantel caught Emma's Aja picture of them years ago. It's taken on a spring afternoon when everything seemed possible. Michael had his arm around her, both of them smiling at the camera, blissfully unaware of the passage of time. Emma reached out and touched the frame, tracing the outline of their younger selves. "You kept this?" she asked softly, almost in disbelief. Michael shrugged, his eyes catching hers with a mixture of vulnerability and warmth. "I kept a few things. Memories, mostly. They reminded me of simpler times, times when I felt understood." Emma's chest tightened. That word understood was heavy with meaning. It wasn't just about memory. It was about a connection that had never fully faded, even when life had moved on without them. "I think I always hoped we'd get a chance to talk like this again," she said. "And now we are." Michael replied, his voice steady but gentle. There was a pause. Neither spoke, but the silence was not empty. It was charged, full of possibilities. It's full of recognition that fate, or perhaps something quieter, subtler than fate, had led him to her doorstep tonight. It wasn't coincidence, they both realized. Some things had a way of circling back, of finding their way home even after years of distance. Emma sipped her tea, suddenly noticing how close the warmth of the mug mirrored the warmth rising in her chest. She hadn't realized how much she had missed the quiet presence of someone who had known her deeply, who had understood her fears, joys, and quiet dreams. It was like seeing a familiar melody after years of silence, and it brought a rush of emotions she hadn't expected to feel tonight. Michael's gaze lingered on her, soft yet intense, and for the first time, he spoke words that carried the weight of the present, not just the past. "Emma, life pulled us apart before, and I can't change that. But being here with you, I realize how much I've carried those moments, those feelings, and I don't want to ignore them anymore." Emma's breath caught. His words weren't grand or dramatic, but they were honest, precise, and deeply human. They were the kind of words that could only come after years of reflection, after living through the emptiness of absence, and after understanding the value of someone who had always mattered. "I've carried them too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "All the years, all the quiet nights. I've thought about what might have been, and I think I was waiting for a chance to feel this again, to feel connected, understood, alive." There it was, the spark, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't passion in the fiery sense. It was the steady glow of something far deeper, recognition, trust, and the raw intensity of feelings that had been buried, not lost. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the years fell away. It was no longer about what had separated them, what was about this moment. Fragile and beautiful, and the possibility of something new. A small coincidence cemented the feeling. A gust of wind blew through the slightly open window, scattering the papers on the coffee table. Michael reached instinctively to catch one, his hand brushing against Emma's. The contact was fleeting, almost accidental, yet it sent a ripple through both of them. Emma felt warmth spread through her fingers, and Michael's gaze softened in that unspoken acknowledgement. They were alive to each other again, fully and completely. "It's strange, isn't it?" Emma said, trying to put her thoughts into words. "How life works sometimes. How a simple thing, a knock on the door, a photograph, even a breeze can remind you of what really matters." Michael nodded, a small, tender smile forming. "Strange, yes. But maybe that's the point. Life isn't always about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's these small, quiet moments that bring the most clarity." They shared a gentle laugh, the kind that feels like release, like letting go of the weight that had settled on their hearts for years. The tension of the unknown had eased, replaced by a sense of quiet certainty. Something had shifted tonight, something neither could fully explain, but both could feel in the deepest part of themselves as the night deepened. Emma realized that the presence of Michael, unexpected, gentle, and full of memory, had brought her a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Not hope in a dramatic, sweeping sense, but the hope that life could still surprise her. That connections lost could be found again, and that hearts, when patient and open, had a way of recognizing what was meant to last. Michael stood to leave, pausing at the door. "I should go," he said softly, "but may I see you again soon?" Emma's heart lifted. She nodded, feeling a quiet thrill of anticipation. "Yes," she said simply, "I'd like that very much." And with that, he stepped out into the night, leaving the door slightly ajar. The wind had softened and the house felt lighter, warmer. Emma sank back into the armchair, a smile tugging at her lips, a gentle hope blooming in her chest. The past had returned not to haunt her, but to remind her that some connections endure quietly, patiently, and with a depth that time cannot erase. Tonight had been unexpected. Tonight had been extraordinary. And as she watched the faint glow of the streetlights outside, Emma realized that this was only the beginning of a story that had waited years to be told. The living room felt quieter now, not empty, but filled with the weight of unsaid words. Emma and Michael sat across from each other, their cups of tea long forgotten on the coffee table. The night outside had deepened, casting soft shadows through the windows and inside. The warmth of the lamplight created a cocoon where time seemed to stretch and slow. Emma's fingers fidgeted with the edge of her blanket. She wanted to speak, to tell Michael everything she had kept locked inside her heart for years. But each time she opened her mouth, the words seemed to vanish. How could she explain the countless nights she had thought of him? The way she had replayed their old conversations in her mind, wondering if he ever felt the same? Michael's gaze held hers, steady and patient, but there was a tension in his posture, subtle but undeniable. She could see the same hesitation reflected in his eyes, the quiet struggle between what he felt and what he had never dared to say. The years apart had been a wall between them, built of distance, uncertainty, and fear. And now, faced with the possibility of connection, neither knew how to begin tearing it down. Michael started, then stopped, as if testing the words in his mind. He took a slow breath, his hands tightening around his mug. "I think there were things I never told you, things I should have said a long time ago." Emma leaned forward slightly, heart pounding. "I think I never said them either," she admitted, her voice soft, almost fragile. "I was scared. I didn't want to ruin what we had. And maybe I thought I'd never get the chance." His eyes softened, and for the first time, there was a glimmer of vulnerability, raw and honest, that made Emma's chest ache. "I felt the same way," he whispered. "I was scared of losing you, even before we were ever together, even before I understood what I felt. I wanted to protect what we had, even if it meant staying silent." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy yet liberating. Both realized that all the years of separation had been filled with quiet longing, moments of what-ifs, and the gentle ache of hearts unspoken. There had been no anger, no bitterness, just the slow, persistent pull of two souls who had once connected deeply and had never truly let go. Emma swallowed hard, trying to keep the tears at bay. Do you think we could have?" She trailed off. unsure how to phrase the longing that had been tucked away inside her for so long. Michael reached out, his hand hovering over hers before finally resting on the edge of her blanket. The gesture was tentative but full of meaning, a bridge between past regrets and present possibilities. "I don't know what the future holds," he admitted, "but I do know this sieve never stopped thinking about you. Never stopped wondering if we could find our way back to each other, even if it's just a little." Emma's eyes glistened. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that years of silence had only amplified. She nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and longing. "I think I've been waiting for this moment without even realizing it," she said softly. "Waiting for the chance to tell you that you mattered, that you still matter." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, letting the unspoken truth settle between them. There was no rush, no need to force words where silence could speak louder. Their hearts understood what their mouths struggled to convey: the quiet, enduring presence of a bond that had survived years of distance and hesitation. Outside, the wind stirred gently, brushing against the windows, and inside, a calm descended over the room. Michael leaned back slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I guess some things are just meant to be said at the right time," he said, a small, rueful smile tugging at his lips. Emma returned the smile, feeling a warmth bloom in her chest. "And maybe some things are meant to be felt long before they are said," she replied. The conversation shifted then from words of regret to memories of joy, quiet, tender moments. The night had deepened, and the house was wrapped in a quiet calm, the kind that carries both reflection and anticipation. Emma and Michael had moved closer to the windows, the soft glow of the streetlights spilling across the floorboards. They had been talking for hours, revisiting memories, exploring unspoken feelings, and rediscovering the bond that had never truly faded. Yet a quiet tension lingered, one of unsaid truths, of feelings kept in check, waiting for the right moment to surface. Emma's gaze drifted to the photograph on the mantel again, the one that had sparked so many emotions earlier. "I keep thinking about that day," she said softly, almost to herself. "We were so carefree, so certain that the world was ours." Michael nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of his empty cup. "We thought we had all the time in the world. But time, it's tricky, isn't it? It can slip through your hands before you even notice." Emma looked at him, suddenly aware of the weight in his voice, the quiet gravity of something unsaid. "Michael, is there something you haven't told me?" she asked gently, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. He hesitated, eyes downcast, hands clenched lightly in his lap. I've held back," he admitted finally, his voice low but steady. "Not because I didn't care, not because I didn't want to tell you, but because I was afraid. Afraid that saying it aloud might change everything, or might scare you away." Emma's chest tightened. She had felt it too, the hesitation, the careful guarding of feelings that were too vulnerable to share. "I understand," she whispered. "I think I've been scared too. Scared that you wouldn't feel the same, that the timing would never be right." Michael lifted his eyes to meet hers, and in that gaze, Emma saw a lifetime of emotions laid bare: longing, regret, hope, and the quiet, unshakable truth that had survived the years. "Emma," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I've loved you for longer than I can even remember. Even when life took us in different directions, even when I tried to move on, a part of me, a big part of me, has always belonged to you." Emma's breath caught. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of years of quiet yearning. Nights spent thinking of him, moments when she had felt the ache of absence in ways words could never describe. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, as though no time had passed at all. "Michael, I've felt the same. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself I could be okay without you. But the truth is, I've never stopped caring. I've never stopped thinking of you, wondering if we'd ever get another chance." His eyes glistened with a quiet intensity. "I was afraid of ruining what we already had. But standing here tonight, seeing you, hearing you say that, I realized that not speaking up would have been the biggest mistake of my life. A small gust of wind stirred the curtains, brushing across the room as though the universe itself was acknowledging the moment. Emma squeezed his hand gently, feeling the electricity of truth and vulnerability pass between them. "It's not about the past anymore," she said softly. "It's about now. It's about what we do with this, with the chance we've been given tonight." Michael nodded, his expression a mixture of relief, hope, and quiet awe. "Yes, now," he agreed. "I want to be honest with you fully and completely. I don't want to let fear keep me silent again. Emma, you mean more to me than I've ever been able to say. You're everything I didn't know I was waiting for." Tears pricked at Emma's eyes, not of sadness, but of release. All the years of longing, hesitation, unspoken words had led to this turning point, a moment where hearts could finally meet without barriers. She leaned forward, resting her forehead lightly against his. "I've waited for this, Michael. I've waited for the chance to hear you say it, and to say it back myself. I think we were always meant to find our way here, no matter how long it took." The room seemed to hold its breath as they stayed like that for a moment, simply existing in each other's presence, feeling the quiet power of truth spoken aloud. The world outside continued, the night carried on. But inside that small living room, time had slowed, creating a space where hearts could finally align. Michael smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from Emma's face. "I promise. I won't let this slip away again," he said, his voice steady and heartfelt. "We'll take it one step at a time. But this, us, it's real. And I don't want to waste another moment pretending it isn't." Emma's lips curved into a gentle, relieved smile. "Neither do I. No more pretending. No more waiting. Tonight, it all begins again. Honestly, completely, together." And with that simple acknowledgement, the turning point was complete. The years of separation, the moments of doubt, and the hidden longing had all led to this single, profound truth. Their hearts had always belonged to each other, patiently waiting for the courage to speak, for the timing to be right, for the chance to begin again. Outside, the night wind whispered through the trees, but inside, Emma and Michael felt a quiet stillness that spoke of hope, renewal, and the gentle power of love spoken aloud. The journey ahead would have its challenges, as all lives do, but for the first time in years, both of them felt the undeniable certainty that they were no longer walking it alone. Tonight was no longer just a reunion, it was a new beginning, a heartfelt turning point that would shape the story of their lives from this moment forward. The morning light spilled gently across Emma's living room, painting soft golden patterns on the walls. The night had passed in quiet conversation and reflection, but neither Emma nor Michael had really slept. They had stayed awake, sitting side by side, letting the silence between them finally become something peaceful rather than heavy. For the first time in years, everything that needed to be said had been spoken, and it brought with it a feeling of release neither of them had expected. Emma moved toward the kitchen, smiling faintly as she brewed fresh coffee. The aroma filled the air, mingling with the quiet sound of birds outside. Michael leaned against the doorway, watching her with a gentle warmth that said more than words could. "Do you remember," Emma began softly, "how you used to stop by before work just for coffee? You'd say it was about saving time, but I think we both knew you didn't really care about the coffee." Michael chuckled, his eyes full of nostalgia. "Guilty as charged. I just wanted an excuse to see you. Back then, every morning felt a little brighter because of those few minutes." Emma handed him a cup, her fingers brushing against his. The small, simple contact carried more meaning than any grand gesture. "It's strange, isn't it?" she said quietly. "After everything, it feels like we've come full circle." He nodded slowly. "Does. But maybe that's what life does. It brings us back to the people and places we were always meant to find again." They sat by the window, sipping their coffee in silence for a moment. Outside, the neighborhood began to stir. Joggers passing by, chilled waiting for the school bus, sunlight glinting off car windows. It was an ordinary morning, yet it felt extraordinary. There was peace, but also possibility. I used to think that love was supposed to be perfect, Emma said after a moment, that it meant everything would fall into place easily. But now I think it's not about perfection at all. It's about patience, forgiveness, and having the courage to begin again, even after mistakes. Michael looked at her, his eyes soft with understanding. You're right. I spent so many years wishing I could go back and fix things, say the right words, make different choices. But maybe it's not about going back. Maybe it's about starting right where we are. Emma smiled faintly, tears gathering in her eyes, but not from sadness. Right where we are, she repeated, her voice full of quiet gratitude. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, two souls who had weathered distance, uncertainty, and time, yet somehow found their way back to the same place. It wasn't a grand reunion marked by fireworks or dramatic music. It was simple, sincere, and profoundly human, the kind of moment that stays in your heart long after it passes. Michael stood and walked toward the door, setting down his cup. I should go, he said softly, though his tone carried neither regret nor reluctance, only respect. We both have our own lives, our own paths. But I don't want this to be the end, Emma. I want this to be the beginning of something honest. No more running, no more what-ifs. Emma nodded, her heart steady but full. You don't have to promise me anything, Michael. Just stay true to what we found tonight. Whatever happens next, let it come naturally. He smiled, that same kind and steady smile she remembered from years ago. That's a promise I can keep. As he reached the door, he hesitated and turned back. Thank you for letting me in last night, he said, his voice carrying both emotion and quiet awe. For listening, for forgiving, for still believing in me, even after all this time. Emma's voice was calm, but her eyes shimmered with emotion. Thank you for coming back, she said. Sometimes all it takes is one unexpected visit to remind us what our hearts were missing. Michael nodded gently and stepped outside, the morning air cool and bright. Emma stood at the doorway, watching him walk down the path until he disappeared around the corner. For a moment, she felt the familiar ache of parting, but it wasn't painful anymore. It was peaceful, because for the first time in years, she knew that their story wasn't over. She turned back inside, the house now bathed in sunlight. Everything looked a little different. Light,